Hello and welcome back to my channel. This is part 4 of the history of France. After Napoleon was exiled to St. Helena, the brother of Louis XVIII became King Louis XVIII. One of his first acts as king was the issuance of the Charter of 1814, which established a constitutional monarchy while preserving the Napoleonic Code and some revolutionary reforms. However, the king retained most executive power, and voting rights were restricted to property owners. These royalist policies and attempts to reverse revolutionary gains fueled widespread discontent among citizens and soldiers. This anger proved critical when Napoleon Bonaparte escaped from Elba in March 1815. His return triggered popular enthusiasm and a swift and overwhelming defection of the military, leading to Louis XVIII's immediate flight to the United Kingdom of the Netherlands. Napoleon entered Paris on March 20, 1815, marking the start of his final period in power, known as the 100 Days, which ended with his ultimate defeat at the Battle of Waterloo on June 18, 1815. After his defeat at Waterloo in June 1815, Napoleon abdicated and was exiled to St. Helena, an island off the Atlantic coast of Africa. This initiated the Second Bourbon Restoration and a return to the monarchy. This period was characterized by the White Terror, in which there was great political repression against revolutionaries and Bonapartists. One of Louis XVIII's chief difficulties during this time was balancing the demands of the fervent ultra-royalists, who wanted a complete return to the absolute monarchy against the need to govern under the more moderate framework of the Charter of 1814. Upon Louis XVIII's death in 1824, his brother became King Charles X. His reign saw a shift towards absolutism, supported by ultra-royalists. He sought to reinforce the divine right of kings and reverse liberal policies, compensating nobles and re-establishing the Catholic Church's influence. These actions alienated the liberal middle class and intellectuals, leading to the July Revolution of 1830. The uprising, known as the Three Glorious Days, July 27th to 29th, 1830, involved intense street fighting in Paris, with barricades erected and royal troops overwhelmed. The National Guard and key deputies sided with the insurgents. After the ousting of Charles X, Louis Philippe I became king. His reign became known as the July Monarchy. Brought to power by the July Revolution of 1830, Louis Philippe took the title King of the French, signifying that his rule was based on popular sovereignty and the Charter of 1830, rather than divine right. His government, characterized by conservative policies, favored the economic elite and largely ignored the demands of the working classes and more radical liberals. Despite a period of industrial growth and stability in the 1840s, the regime was ultimately weakened by a restrictive voting system, political corruption, and a severe economic crisis in 1846. This widespread discontent culminated in the Revolution of 1848, which forced Louis Philippe to abdicate and marked the end of the monarchy in France. The 1848 Revolution shattered the July Monarchy, clearing the path for the hastily formed Second Republic. Born from popular upheaval, the new regime championed democratic principles, introducing universal male suffrage, expanding civil liberties, and establishing national workshops in a bold bid to mitigate social inequality. These progressive measures, however, quickly sundered the nation. The eventual termination of the workshops provoked the June Days uprising, a visceral, violent conflict between government forces and Parisian workers that revealed the tension, separating revolutionary fervor from the cautious, conservative fear of socialism. The Constitution limited him to a single 4-year term. Determined to retain power, he staged a coup d'etat on December 2, 1851. He then dissolved the assembly, arrested his opponents, and called for a referendum. By an overwhelming majority, the plebiscite cemented his rule and provided the legal basis for dismantling the existing constitution. This new authority gave him the power to issue the 1852 Constitution, which vested all political power in his hands. This action effectively dissolved the Second Republic. He held another referendum that approved of the restoration of the empire, allowing him to declare himself Emperor Napoleon III. In the elections of December 1848, Louis Napoleon Bonaparte, nephew of Napoleon I, was elected by a landslide victory. His election reflected both the enduring prestige of the Bonaparte name and the disillusionment with the instability of the Republican government. He promised order, prosperity, and national glory, appealing to peasants and workers alike. Once in office, he quickly sought to expand his authority, clashing with the National Assembly and curbing political meetings and freedom of the press. The Constitution limited him to a single 4-year term. Determined to retain power, he staged a coup d'etat on December 2, 1851. He then dissolved the assembly, arrested his opponents, and called for a referendum. By an overwhelming majority, the plebiscite cemented his rule and provided the legal basis for dismantling the existing constitution. This new authority gave him the power to issue the 1852 Constitution, which vested all political power in his hands. This action effectively dissolved the Second Republic. He held another referendum that approved of the restoration of the empire, allowing him to declare himself Emperor Napoleon III. The expansion of the Second Overseas French Empire, spearheaded by Emperor Napoleon III, was a deliberate campaign to restore France's global prestige and secure vital economic advantages. This period, roughly spanning 1852 to 1870, saw France establish its firm grip on key territories, most notably in Southeast Asia, where the conquest of Cochinchina, southern Vietnam, and the protectorate over Cambodia laid the groundwork for French Indochina. Simultaneously, in Africa, French control over Algeria was solidified, and influence was extended in Senegal and the Red Sea region with the acquisition of French Somaliland, all motivated by the dual need for raw materials and strategic naval control. The French intervention in Mexico, 1861 to 1867, was driven primarily by France's ambitions to expand its influence in Latin America and to counter U.S. power. The intervention began when Mexican President Benito Juarez declared a moratorium on debt payments to foreign creditors, which included France, Britain, and Spain. While Britain and Spain eventually withdrew, France, led by Emperor Napoleon III, sought to capitalize on the instability by installing a pro-French monarchy under Archduke Maximilian of Austria. A key battle during this conflict was the Battle of Puebla on May 5, 1862, where Mexican forces, commanded by General Ignacio Zaragoza, soundly defeated the much larger and better equipped French army. Though initially successful, the French faced fierce resistance from Mexican Republicans and growing unpopularity at home. Ultimately, the intervention culminated in the withdrawal of French forces in 1867, leading to Maximilian's capture and execution and solidifying the Mexican Republic's survival against foreign imperial ambitions. The Crimean War began in 1853 when a crisis ensued over control of the religious sites of the Holy Land. This conflict quickly escalated as Russia, seeking to exploit the Ottoman Empire's weakening state and gain influence over Orthodox Christians within Ottoman territories, occupied the Danubian principalities. Britain and France, unwilling to see Russian expansion into Europe, allied with the Ottoman Turks and declared war in 1854. The fighting concentrated on the Crimean Peninsula, resulting in the infamous and brutal siege of Sevastopol, which was characterized by devastating disease and logistical failures on both sides. The war concluded in 1856, but despite the heavy sacrifices, the resulting Treaty of Paris successfully contained Russian ambitions in the Black Sea. The Italian Risorgimento began its course in the mid-19th century. France became involved in it, both as a champion of nationalist aspirations and to guard its own interests. At the battles of Magenta and Solferino, an alliance of France and Sardinia-Piedmont defeated Austria in the Second War of Italian Independence. Napoleon III had an avaricious intent in being involved in the war, for he sought to shift the balance of power in Europe and defeat his arch-rival, Austria. Queen Isabella II of Spain was deposed in 1868, and Spain offered its vacant crown to a Prussian prince named Leopold. Fearing that France would be surrounded by German powers, Napoleon III demanded that no German prince ever accept the Spanish throne. When the Prussian king refused to make such a promise, his advisor, Otto von Bismarck, edited the wording of their diplomatic exchange, the Ems dispatch, to make it sound insulting. This provocation enraged the French public, and France declared war on Prussia in July 1870. The conflict was swift and decisive. Prussia and its German allies defeated France, captured Napoleon III at the Battle of Sedan, and laid siege to Paris. In January 1871, Germany was officially unified, and France was forced to cede the provinces of Alsace and Lorraine and pay a large indemnity. The war ended the French Second Empire and led to the proclamation of the French Third Republic. The Second French colonial empire gained momentum after being defeated in the Franco Prussian War in 1871. France aggressively expanded its overseas territories to restore its national prestige, pivoting away from the American-centric focus of its first empire toward Africa and Southeast Asia. This strategic shift led to a vast network of control, including protectorates over Tunisia and much of West Africa, the creation of French Equatorial Africa and French Indochina. The empire reached its zenith in the aftermath of World War I, by assuming League of Nations mandates over former German and Ottoman territories. Following the crushing defeat in the Franco Prussian War and the collapse of the Second Empire and a devastating siege, Paris was devastated. The actions of the newly formed conservative Third Republic, signing a humiliating peace treaty and retreating to Versailles, angered the Parisians. In response, they created a radical, socialist government that seized control of the city in March 1871. This experiment in self-rule was short-lived, as it was brutally suppressed by the French army 2 months later during the Bloody Week, resulting in thousands of deaths and deportations to penal colonies. The early years of the Third French Republic were marked by widespread corruption and political gridlock, particularly over the contentious issue of a potential return to monarchical rule. The National Assembly was dominated by monarchists. However, they were unable to unite behind a single candidate for the throne. This stalemate created instability until 1879, when moderate opportunist Republicans secured key electoral victories. They then initiated widespread secular reforms in education and the civil service, successfully shifting public opinion and solidifying the Republic as the permanent form of government. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Stay tuned for Part 5.